But the daily practice, the daily discipline of some time spent in upright sitting or whatever posture works for you. I say upright sitting, that really means, the practice of being still and present. Whether we call that a Buddhist practice, a Dharma practice, or not. Yeah, I had a friend who was a student who um, always had a hard time sitting and maintaining a discipline of sitting, and it was tough for him physically. And but he used to really enjoy sitting in the garden. And I remember talking with him and saying, why don't you, and maybe get off a cushion and just sit in a comfortable chair in the morning outside, enjoy nature, have your coffee with the birds and and the sunrise, and practice that. And he started doing that, and that was a practice he could maintain very well. And we would laugh about it because he's just made that a part of his like every morning and every evening routine to spend time just outside alone in the garden in the quiet, right? So practice doesn't have to be formal all of the time. It's nice to intersperse our meditation practice with formality that helps to strengthen it. But our own practice is one that has to match our the broad conditions of our life, something that we can really integrate and commit to. And that way, if you do it your way, if you love it, you make it a part of your life in your way, then it's so much easier to maintain. Welcome anyway for our continued practice for the 10 parameters. I think we're, if I'm right, I think we're at number four today of our 10-week series. And we'll see. I think after we complete the 10 weeks, barring, meteor strikes, and we're all still here, then we'll probably go back to the no assigned topic on Sundays, but maybe look to do another consecutive series, perhaps in the fall, if that's proving useful. Let's start immediately with right intention. Our right intention is to sit well, spend 30 minutes in a time of concentrated, present awareness, a time to let the busyness of the mind, all our preoccupations, the things that we need to do or we're thinking about doing next, just let things be uh, disengaged from in terms of active planning. Right? So nothing that we need to really think about or ponder during this time. We can bring attention at the outset to the body. Notice the fact of the matter in that we're sitting here. Right? The whole universe since the Big Bang and perhaps before has conspired wonderfully to bring you to this point of realization now. Whatever happened before, the long story of our life and the lives before us, it all went down, it all happened, and here we are. And now this is a time to just be with things as they are, utterly as they are. The body as it is, notice that. Just feel the weight and the isness of the body. Bring some attention into the body, soft shoulders, relax the hands, plant the feet or the knees, as the case may be, if you're in a chair or on the ground. A moment to reflect and set the intention that for this period of time, I will be deeply involved in the art of being present. Let's bring some attention to our breathing and begin to deepen the breathing. Let's not overlook this, the importance of this. This deeper breathing really helps to set the table for meditation. Set the table, drop an anchor into presence. and also a practical aspect of on the breath inward, straightening the body without forcing. On the out breath, letting go without collapsing in the body. I'm grateful to be here on this spring afternoon and share this practice together. I'm grateful to be breathing. Quite frankly, I don't always remember that, but breathing in and breathing out, what a gift. Okay, so a few rounds of deeper breathing to settle. I'll strike the bell. Let's sit together in good company, though we might be meeting online. Still, there's a magic afoot. Somehow that connection of Sangha, of the community, is still felt and experienced in a real way. I remember being very surprised at that in my first, Zoom practice. It's just like, wow, there is actually an undoubted connection with everyone. Maybe it's a subtler connection, so let's look more deeply to experience that. In a difficult world, we sit with like-minded, positively intentioned, friendly people in order to do our best to live an upright life for the sake of this one and that one. That's a noble practice, whatever we call it. So please sit all of the way down. The only thing you need to be is completely who you are. But I think we can manage that. At the sound of a bell, let's let the breathing fall into its natural pace and rhythm. Please relax. Let's enjoy our life. Okay, well, thank you again for joining. So in continuing with our 10 perfections, I wanted 6 sounds easier than 10, but it's 10 after all. And I just want to spend a moment in just recapping the 10 parameters, as a whole, right? Because a list of 10 which do have a linear quality to them. I'm just going to read what was the original statement around this class. The 10 perfections are qualities of heart and mind that cultivate wisdom, compassion, and freedom on the path of awakening. So cultivating these qualities of wisdom, compassion, and freedom, they have to be there already in order to be cultivated. Deeply rooted in the Buddhist tradition, these virtues, generosity, morality, renunciation, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, determination, loving kindness, and equanimity. Those all, I think we can agree, all stellar qualities. These qualities offer practical guidance for living with greater integrity and clarity. So if we are able to practice even a few or perhaps all of these qualities, then naturally we're living a life of greater integrity and clarity. But I mentioned there's something of a linear progression. The first 3, which have been covered in the last three weeks, form something of a foundation. It's said to form the foundation of a Buddhist path, right? Of a commitment to a certain lifestyle, a certain way of being, right? So those 3 which you looked at so far: generosity or dana, morality, or we could say ethics, maybe ethics is a better word there, and renunciation. And a way we could translate that is renunciation, a letting go of just material aspects, sure, but also psychological aspects, other things that can be let go of. So beginning the path of the parameters comes from a desire to improve the impact of our life, which may come from a place of wanting to do that for us, for ourselves. Maybe that's how we come to a practice like Buddhism, meditation, or Zen. You know, there are certain things that we want to work on. There are things that we want to even move away from, right? So we pick what we consider to be a wholesome direction, right? Hopefully we're on pretty safe ground if we decide to live in a more Buddhist manner, right? It's got a good reputation in that sense, right? Like broadly, you know, not that there aren't exceptions to that, but to live according to certain time-honored, well-tested principles to foster the better aspects of our human nature. And let's face it, as a human being, we really do need to foster the good qualities and limit the negative aspects. If it's our human condition left to run amok or unchecked, is often a suboptimal way to live. That varies very much depending on our particular circumstances and our conditions. But the practice of the parameters is moving away from the dukkha, the dissatisfaction, that kind of that sticky, no flow difficulty that tends to, you know, is an aspect of the human condition. We're moving away, we're addressing that dukkha and moving towards, ultimately in the tradition, to becoming a Buddha. You know, in the Zen tradition, of which I'm you know, I've studied and practiced in the Zen tradition for many years. It has its own unique flavor in that in China, in the Tang Dynasty and Song Dynasty, Buddhahood was seen as something that one could directly experience in this lifetime, much more tangibly and experientially than was perhaps taught by other traditions. You know, in classical Buddhism, it would be fair to say that the journey toward being a Buddha is a multi-lifetime endeavor in the cosmology of Buddhism. Right? It's said that only in, you know, maybe one Buddha in like an age or an epoch of the world, in like one long age of the world, a true Buddha comes along. From a Zen perspective, we go to when we talk about the Buddha, we're talking about the Buddha's realization, not forgetting or being actually encouraged by the fact that he was a human being like you and I. And whatever the Buddha can achieve or attain in this life, you and I could also attain in this life. Right? But in early Buddhism, it certainly has this aspect of something of a linear path over a long period of time, where we are refining and developing the good qualities and moving away from the more negative qualities. Now, if we look at it in our own life, you know, if we reflect on our life for a moment, or I reflect on my life for a moment to just own that part, then I feel like the process of working on to grow my good qualities and limit my negative qualities, that feels very much a work in progress rather than the finished article, right? If we meet somebody who claims to be completely enlightened, to be emancipated from all suffering and the human condition, and some people do that throughout history, I think it's healthy to be very suspicious of that person. You know, certainly like in my lifetime, even the most polished and functional person that I've ever met has some suboptimal aspects, right? And are obviously human, right? So we never escape, or we oughtn't to escape, the fact that we are involved in a practice, and we're really only as developed. All that we have attained is this moment now. We have attained to this. It said that the Buddha, the Tathagata, is the one who has thus come, the one who has thus arrived. It's someone who is here now and awake to here now. That's the only attainment. You know, anything else that we so-called attain, something that can be kind of remembered or relied upon, is necessarily a working fiction, is something that is ultimately subject to impermanence. I guess I'm starting to lean into talking about wisdom, which is the subject of today's topic. But again, beginning with the commitment to wishing to live well and live an upright and useful life. That's our first parameter, our first perfection, is generosity. Wanting, which is, you know, one aspect of that, as we say, is to really deeply, is to genuinely and ultimately want the best for everyone. Everyone in the world. Everyone that can be, you know. And for some people might be on our shit list for many years on there, right? It's kind of, I theoretically want the best for that person, but I'm okay if they get what's coming to them for a while, right? Because again, we're human beings, but relatively, we might do that, but really generosity is opening to the fact that on an intrinsic level, we wish to end suffering. We wish for best for everything. And I think we can all agree that at the root there is that the better aspect of our human nature that wishes for suffering to end, and that to be true for all things. From there, morality and ethics that Tim was talking about a couple of weeks ago, if you were there for that, you know, it's not enough to just kind of hope for the lessening of suffering. We actually have to get involved deeply in the business of lessening suffering. And to do that, it's important to live by certain ethics. It's to have a sense of moral compass, right? It's to refrain from harmful actions and to foster and perform positive actions. So there's conduct. We start to put some guardrails up. We start to add to that again to strengthen that directionality. We move into the third perfection then, renunciation. That sounds like a strong word to me. I'm a little bit scared of the word renunciation, but you know, I look at that about, you know, letting go of clinging to, you know, as human beings, we cling. As human beings, we're attached to things. We're involved in attachment and aversion. Renunciation, one could say simply, is the act of letting things go, letting those things go that we're negatively attached to. So this is like our beginning of our practice life, the path. And then we come to today's topic, what comes in now at number 4. It's like wisdom. And we might feel like, okay, good, you know, put a little bit of work in, and now I'm going to start getting a little bit of wisdom. You know, there's something that's going to come in. This word, wisdom, is a fascinating word. Like I often like to go to the etymology of words, you know, to really learn something about the word and where it came from. And I was very happy to read about the etymology of wisdom, because it syncs up beautifully with how it's understood in Dharma practice. So the word wisdom, originally, it's a Proto-Indo-European word which has its roots in to see, right? So wisdom is to see, and then later Proto-Germanic would become to see, and that brings in the aspect of law or judgment, right? So to be able to judge, to see, and to be able to judge. But then when it enters Old English and becomes the word wisdom, wisdom then means the word wise comes from learning discernment. Learning discernment is what is wise. The condition of learning. And what is it that we're learning? We're learning discernment. And the dom at the end, that suffix dom, means the quality or state or condition of having discernment and learning, the state of learning discernment. So that's kind of like our root word for wisdom. Clearly not just about intellectual knowledge, right? Although intellectual knowledge has a large part too. It's interesting in Dharma practice because of its emergence from the East. It has always felt like it's run a little counter to classic Western philosophy, right? So you have this maybe juxtaposition of a more Western approach to understanding life and philosophy, meeting a more Eastern approach to life and philosophy. I think that's a fair generalization to make. And certainly in the United States, there was that rich time and, maybe beginning, I guess, in the 60s and 70s, where a lot of Eastern wisdom traditions really became popular and became much studied, right? And that's still happening today. But if we go to the roots of Western philosophy, I found this wonderful old quote from Socrates, right? Who said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." It's one of the pivotal figures of Greek philosophy and Western philosophy writ large said, the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. That should sound very familiar for those who've studied Zen or Dharma, pointing to the condition or state of the understanding of not knowing as being the basis. Another quote from Socrates: "To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom." And that matches up very much with Buddhism. To know thyself is the beginning of wisdom. But I would, gosh, am I going to be arrogant enough to try and add something to what Socrates said here? But he's not around. I don't think he's on the Zoom looking through. So to know thyself is the beginning of wisdom. You could say to know thyself is the beginning, middle, and end of wisdom. But it asks, in that sense, to know thyself, what is it that we're calling the self? The Buddha, in one of his final teachings, said to remember who you are as a key and simple teaching, to come back to who you are, to know thyself. When we look at the self, or if we take a moment to think about how we regard ourselves, then often there is imagine we had that exercise and somebody said, okay, write down 10 things about yourself, right? Often it would be just a kind of a description, maybe where we're from, you know, maybe like just some facts, our name, something about our history, or our likes and dislikes. So often when we're talking about knowing the self, it becomes involved in a definition of what we can know about this one, what I can know about the self. And then we can extend that out. If we turn the mirror out, we can look out into the world and like, what do we know about others, and what do we know about the world? And again, we could come up with some things, but those things often have more of a kind of a fixed nature. And as human beings, we're very prone to knowledge capture, right? Being captured by something that is represented as a truth or a definition about people in the world. You may have experienced that if you've been exposed to social media, right? Like that would be like the most chronic, like that kind of fixed knowing, understanding the world through this lens, understanding people through this lens, summed up in a few sentences. But that really isn't the knowing that we're involved in our development and practice of wisdom. I think it's much more useful to go back to this root approach. Wisdom is always learning, right? Which is necessarily not is being adaptive to the world, and being adaptive to the changing causes and conditions of the world. If we're resting on a fixed idea about the world and the people in it, then unerringly that knowledge is out of sync with the actual unknowable reality of the world, right? Our picture of knowing might be a good match for a period of time, but as the world is constantly moving and unfolding, whatever we know about people and things is always drifting away. Is drifting away. So practice really behooves us to be students, right? It's like, that's what a teacher should be. A teacher should just be a good student, you know, right? Rather than dispensing knowledge from on high. A teacher is somebody who's been a student for a long period of time, and has not been able to be deterred from their practice, but instead continues to go on to learn and to study, right? And then, so I don't know, sometimes, you know, sometimes people become, do you ever meet anyone who's just became very fixed, like they formed their ideas 20 years ago and then that's the same, and it just somewhat kind of freezes in place, right? I mean, that can happen to the best of us, but it's, you know, sometimes you get kind of frozen in place with a worldview and an opinion set and a belief Rolodex, and then there's no real you know, and then challenge to that worldview is not really allowed. It just gets kind of fixed and cherished and relied upon, and learning sort of stops in a way, right? I think we can all maybe we can see that in ourselves, and see that in others. When it comes to the Dharma, again, there isn't really much that you don't have to remember anything really. You know, you keep a calendar and realize we're sitting at 3 o'clock, and that's enough to show up with. You show up as you are, and your understanding of the Dharma doesn't need to be carried in. Like our understanding of life doesn't need to be carried in. If we're actively involved in learning, if we're awake and involved in what is real, then that's enough. You are an awake, alive, present person. Knowledge is there when we need it. Of course, experience in life really adds to wisdom, right? It's just we gain or develop a certain wisdom just through going around the block enough times, right? It's like you just see how that kind of works, you know. Right, it's just like you just like that saying, it's not my first rodeo, you know. You see how things tend to go, right? And yet what's important is not predetermining that. It's knowing how things tend to go. It's probably going to go like this, but maybe not, right? In our learning process, in our study of wisdom, it's really essential to have a very alive maybe. A very alive maybe, right? Where we kind of, we're investigating what's going on, but we don't lose contact with the possibility that we might be completely wrong. We don't lose we don't lose contact with the actuality that we don't see the full picture. That whatever it is that we're involved in and we're learning is always necessarily partial. Then we're much more able to accept that we're wrong. We're able to change our mind in real time, right? If new information comes in, to be able to move away from fixed positions. So this learning is very important. Again, like at the beginning, just recapping with the parameters, we are cultivating inherent qualities, right? It's not that we start with zero wisdom and then we're building up our store of wisdom points, but rather wisdom is always there is always wisdom available. It's much more than just my sum total of my learned experience and what I filed away. But wisdom is emerging all around us, right? If we treat the self as a narrow body, as just a separate me here, fingers and just at the extent of my fingers and toes, right? Then that's a conventional, but from the standpoint of the Dharma, a mistaken view. Right? What we open to is a broader experience and a broader sphere of self. So rather than the self just being little old me here, the self is this one here and this one that is extending in all directions. This one that has ultimately a limitless connection that is in touch with all things in the world, all things in the universe. Which sounds somewhat grandiose, but we can experience it by stepping outside on a starry night and looking up and seeing that we are in complete connection with like the Milky Way. That's like big enough for most of us. But as a human being, we're often contracting and condensing into a more narrow, this narrow self, which is really just has this sense of separation and is living between the ears. If we're stuck there, if we have this kind of fixed separateness, we're much more prone to losing the richness or the fullness of wisdom and collapsing down to just ideas, opinions, belief, and limited knowledge. Right? So this is why our practice of meditation is so important. Is if you can give some time to authentic sitting, right? In whatever method that you have affinity and have learned, and give some time per day to actually practicing and living that, then it will slowly and inexorably widen your experience of the self, broaden the sphere of self, right? Which takes it way beyond just the limited I, me view. And we are doing, that's happening naturally. It's not dependent on Dharma practice. Dharma practice and meditation is a powerful accelerant, right? It's kind of like it's an accelerant. It's, you are already on, have already been on since the moment you were born, a path to full awakening to what life is. And the Dharma teachings and meditation help to catalyze and really help open that up. But even without something as formal as Dharma practice or meditation, your wisdom and these other qualities can grow just through living in the world. But again, if we have the backbone and the guardrails of a good orientation towards how to live life. We don't have to use the parameters of the perfections. We don't have to use the Eightfold Path. But in my experience, Buddhism is a wonderfully effective framework. You know, the best one that I've found, certainly. You know, a lifetime's very short when it comes to experiencing the many different ways you could be living it, right? It's, you really just got to pick one or two things. Don't have time to try everything out. But in experience like Buddhism and Dharma practice, it's just it's a beautiful framework, right? And what it also does is it hands the responsibility. It really hands you the responsibility. You know, that was a key quality about the Buddha. He said, try these things for yourself and use the ones that work for you. If it doesn't work for you, throw them out. He really wasn't trying to, I don't think, you know, convert people to a very dogmatic, fixed way of being. Right. So the other aspect of this word, you know, with wisdom, this discernment is interesting. Like really being able to see the way things are, to be able to see the subtlety, to be able to really see into what is going on. This wisdom aspect is mirrored in the Eightfold Path, particularly in the first three steps on the Eightfold Path are involved in wisdom. Right, the Eightfold Path developed from the Four Noble Truths, so there's kind of like something of a linear quality there. The Buddha is pointing out life is dukkha. Okay, there's suffering inherent in the human condition, and we're all subject to it. It turns out there's quite a lot we can do about it. We can limit. There's a lot of unnecessary suffering going on, and we can limit that for the benefit of everybody. How do we do? That's the good news, right? How do we do that? And then he went on. We do that with the Eightfold Path. We do that by living a certain lifestyle in order to reduce suffering. And Buddhism can be boiled down to just that. It is a way to relieve inherent human suffering and lead a more useful, involved, intimate, and engaged life in the world. Now, how do we do that? In the Eightfold Path, it leads with right view, right understanding. This is wisdom. The right view of a right understanding. Now, if we think about right view, if we kind of hop on the internet and ask a question, what should I think about this? Plenty of people will give you plenty of answers what you should be thinking, right? Like there's many people who are very convinced of their right view and happy to try to convince you of it, right? And then say everybody else is wrong, right? That's pretty obvious. But right view is not a fixed definition in practice. Right view is what we like to call seeing things as they are. Seeing things as they are, or can be called right understanding. Standing under reality and then seeing its nature. Like you stand under the blue sky. When you stand under a blue sky, you clearly understand that it's blue. There's no getting away from it. But when we come to life, like in our dealings, particularly with people, right? Because that's where the problems typically emanate from, right? In all of my years at Yokoji, rocks, trees, deer, the mountains, the sky, we've got along famously all of these years. There's been some weather events that have been challenging, but for the most part, all of the problems have and continue to arise from dealing with other people. That might just be me, and you're thinking, I've always gotten along wonderfully in the human realm with no issues, but it's been my experience. So that's not as easy as standing under the blue sky and seeing that it's blue, right? When we look into the complicated world of people and things, and we look into the complicated world of this one here, right? Maybe the biggest puzzle box of all, right? This one here, then of course it's much more complicated. It's much more difficult to see. But if we practice right view, right understanding, then through our practice, through wisdom, through cultivating good, positive qualities, through our practice, that helps us to more wisely discern what's real, what's actually going on, what's walking like a duck and talking like a duck and is a duck. The natural wisdom that arises from just seeing how things actually are. But we find that in our own lives, or I find I'm very good at selling myself a vacuum cleaner. I'm very good at telling myself a story about me and the world and other people. I have to watch out for that one. That one has a narrative and knows that he knows he's right. Right? But when we develop and we gain wisdom, you understand that that's not right. Being convinced that we are right is not right. Right? Thinking that we're right is also subject to being not right, and also, right? So wisdom involves this right view, this right understanding is seeing the nature of the human condition, our own and others. Seeing that it's blurry, that it's indistinct, that there's a lot that could be and there's a lot that might not, right? That we're only ever getting a snapshot and a limited perspective of the world. And then we really see with clarity that not knowing is not some fancy Zen thing, it's just like, oh, not. It's like, no, it's literally not knowing. We don't know. We don't know, but we're living in it, actively discerning what's what. Actually, engaging with life and seeing what's here and being involved and discerning as we go. Not to arrive at a place of fixed conclusion, but just as an endless experiment, an endless exploration. We're exploring as we go with right view, right understanding. The next two, briefly involved with wisdom there, right intention, resolve, you could say, intention or resolve, and right. And the third one is right speech, interestingly, right? But this intention, I like to bring this up at the beginning of our sitting practice. Just intend to set a clear intention that I will sit well. For this period of time, I'm going to practice being present. Have a clear intention to live well, live a useful and upright life. Make those intentions clear, and then bring things in that support those intentions. We have to be careful what we allow in from the world, right? There's 10,000 twisted narratives competing for our attention. all of the time. So like, what do we intend to do? What do we intend? How do we intend to live? Right speech, gosh, that could be its own Dharma talk, and maybe should be, right? The right speech, but like, this how, again, this is involved in wisdom. I had those couple of wonderful quotes from Socrates. When I was doing a little research and looking up wisdom, mostly I just found like a slew of quotes. It doesn't matter who said them. Nobody is ever truly wise, like Socrates say. The only thing you should know is that you don't know. Does that make him a wise person? He said something very wise. Sure, he was wise, but I'm sure he had his downside too. Like, maybe coming home to Mr. Socrates in the evening was, not the easiest thing. Who knows, right? But, but right speech, my goodness, you just see how important it is the way that we comport ourselves. Speech is our primary way that we communicate with people around us and the world. If we can just, I said a couple of weeks ago with these 10 perfections, if you can pick one and just really make real headway in one direction, in one quality, that changes your life. If we can commit to right speech, I'd say that's, can you imagine? Human nature, let's just freeze things on Earth. All right, everybody on Earth commit to right speech. That would have a powerful difference. We don't have that power, but we have that power in our own life.
Hi, I'm Franz with Long Beach Meditation. Your gracious generosity makes this programming possible. If you found this video to be of value, please consider making a donation here. If you'd like to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to stay in touch with Long Beach Meditation, click here to subscribe. Thank you, and may all beings be happy.